Hey everybody, welcome to Houdini Hangout. This is Thursday the 15th of December. Doing things one day late this week because I was traveling a little bit yesterday. I got to go up to Toronto to visit the Side Effects HQ and they had a little holiday party. So that was a lot of fun and really nice to see everybody up there. So yeah, everybody, it was a nice little day trip for me. I live right on the border, if you didn't know that already. So it's pretty normal for me to be, going back and forth to Canada. It's pretty normal for anybody from the Western New York area. So, we went up there for the day and, it was a good time. Got to chat a little bit of Houdini and have some good food and treats and snacks and all sorts of great stuff. So, it was a lot of fun. And the whole team is awesome. I got to meet a lot more people this time than I had in the past. And the more people I meet, the more I'm reminded that the whole Side Effects crew is just an awesome group of people. So, hey, KG, how you doing, man? Good to have you with us. Glad to have you here for the stream tonight. So a couple little like housekeeping type things, I guess you could say. One thing was I had a little poll up recently. And I'm just going to throw this up on screen so we can kind of see what I'm talking about here. So, if we look, I'm just going to move it over so you cannot, so it doesn't get hidden behind my head. So anyways, I was asking a couple different things. One of the first things, sure. Yeah, we could definitely talk about that. I was actually going to, talk a little bit about some of that stuff tonight. So yeah, for sure. We could definitely go over that. Yeah. Inside of a wrangle. Yeah. The support team is absolutely amazing. Can't say enough good stuff about them. If you knew how many people it was, it's like shockingly low. So, tip your waiters and give them lots of praise on them because they are absolutely incredible. The support team is wild. A lot of great people on that team as well. So, anyways, so, I had this little poll up and I was really kind of surprised with some of the results. So it looks like the most popular options for this poll were F, which is Solaris and USD, and I, which is VEX and VOPs. So that's pretty cool. So we had a little discussion on the Discord server here. If you're not on the Discord server, you can go to HoudiniHangout.com. It's right there. Just dropped it in the chat. So there should be a link there for you to grab that from our website and you can sign up there. But some people were talking a little bit about the VEX and VOPs topics and basically were saying that it'd be great to just have, more of that kind of content here. A lot of different stuff here talking about some of the different things that people might maybe have struggled with, like totally getting through, some really in-depth stuff. For one, this algorithmic design workbook, which is really good. The CG Wiki's Joy of VEX, which is pretty neat as well. So it's like a whole like way to walk through different kind of concepts in VEX over, you can do it however quickly you want, but there's kind of 20 lessons to it, which is really nice. Matt Estella's stuff is always great. So that's really good. What I might do is go through some of that actually. Seems like it could be a really interesting thing to go through. So I'm going to look into some of that stuff kind of over my Christmas break from work. But I was just really surprised that a lot of people were interested in VEX. Usually because what I hear is that that's kind of the scariest part of it. Obviously, VEX isn't scary is one of the, things here that kind of, talk about a little bit. And so it's pretty interesting to hear that, first of all, as one of the things. As far as Solaris and USD goes, great. I've been in that world for most of this past year, so happy to talk about that a little bit more. If you are interested in something like that and some maybe a little talk from yours truly, there is a link here that I will drop in the chat. There is a video here, and I will link to this. Oops. This is actually on Vimeo, but I will drop it in here for you guys. That's actually a talk that I did at a couple of live events for educationally focused events. And so if you wanted to learn anything more about Solaris and USD, which I will make a point to talk about a little bit more in the coming year, there is a talk right there to get a little bit of maybe a little head start into some of the SOPs or the LOPs and Solaris and USD stuff. So anyway, so those are the two top ones. And I was just a little bit surprised by that, honestly. So if you do go on the Discord, you can see kind of the results of the polls here. They should show up, I think. I don't think there's any reason they wouldn't. And if you have other topic suggestions, you can always drop them into this topic suggestion forum here channel that we have. I'm actually going to switch up the way I do that probably over the break. I'm probably going to turn that into like one of like post-based channels that you can have. But anyways, yeah, so just a cool way to be able to kind of talk with people on here, and even the live chat goes right into here as well. So this is us right now. So a little inception action there. But anyways, that is that. So yeah, that was kind of interesting for me to see some of those results and check that out. Also, I had a question on there just if anybody was actually, thought it was interesting to have guests on and things like that. So I certainly want to try to do that as well. So that's going to be something that I'll probably do in the coming year. I don't know how many people I'll be able to get or anything like that, or who, but certainly something I kind of have always been interested in. We got to have my coworker Michael Goldfarb on the stream talking about some Kinefx stuff, and hopefully you found that as interesting as I did. Just enjoyed chatting with him and kind of getting in depth on some of those topics. So so anyways, so while I was thinking about that, I was thinking kind of towards what we were doing last week with this snow plow simulation and stuff like that, and we were talking a little bit about how to make it more chunky, how to make it feel a little bit less regular and all that. Oh, sorry, my head, this headband just like disconnected on me. That's really funny. This headband is really old. Just got new earphones for this, but the headband itself is a little ancient, so hopefully that'll stay together. Anyways, sorry. So I wanted to look a little bit at maybe some ways to make some chunks in this snow, basically, and do something a little bit more interesting as far as that goes. So let's look at maybe a couple different ways of doing that. We'll look at maybe 3 or 4 different ways that we could go in and affect this simulation using some whether it's just SOPs tools, whether it's some VOPs, we can look at how to do that, or we can look at some VEX code and see how those go, just to kind of tweak this simulation and make it kind of art directed a little bit more, which obviously is always something you hear when people talk about Houdini, kind of is the art directability of the software and how you can kind of go in and tweak these elements to be able to get kind of the look that you want. So this is going to piggyback on last week. So if you're interested in how this stuff was built, you can find that in last week's episode or stream or whatever you want to call it. But so we won't be really talking about maybe why the sim is working the way it is or how I set it up. It's pretty straightforward, I think. But there's something I just wanted to play around with and see, because I'm doing an image contest thing, and I wanted to do a wintry thing. So I was going to do like a snowplow some sort of thing with that. Maybe about to run over a snowman. That's my thought for this weekend. So anyways, so yeah, so let's jump into some Houdini and we'll kind of get going with this. All right. So we have our snowplow here. All right, we have the geometry for it. And in fact, I was kind of thinking of one thing I was going to do. I'm going to probably take one fewer up here, I think, or maybe two fewer. Just reduce this a little bit. So we've got our geometry here that's kind of turning into a volume so that we can use it that way. Let me just see what's going on here. This looks a little weird. Hold on. Hide the other geometry. Yeah, it's a little strange. It looks like it's doing something odd there. What is that? Oh, that's why. That's why. I changed. This is one of the not great ways of doing this. Probably there's much better ways of doing it by grouping and geometry and stuff like that. But I basically just selected these points, and because these two were extraneously still in that selection, it was still getting adjusted. So, hey, how's it going? Nice to have you on the stream. Orient Axis, nice to have you. All right, so that should be good. All right, so what I wanted to do as well. Yeah, no problem, man. Happy to be online streaming tonight. All right, I'm gonna adjust this a little bit, just make this a little bit more. Maybe just a little bit more exaggerated. I think it'll do a little bit better job. Great. So there's that. I'm just tweaking these little parameters here. Again, if you want to see exactly why or how I did these, you can check out last week's stream, and that should give you a nice explanation. I mean, this geometry is garbage. I did it really quickly, but it'll fit the bill. Anyways, so here's our sim in here, and let's just take a look at how our solver is kind of set up right now. I got this. This is interesting. I got this warnings thing, this 16 warnings generated when I turned on the jitter on the snow. So I'm kind of surprised by that. Not sure why that is. Excuse any drinking sounds. Sorry if I'm being a little loud there. Okay, so we've got our snowplow here. Ooh, in fact, we'd probably want to pull that back a little bit so it doesn't start intersecting that. So let me do that. So I'm going to take, where did I do that? Sorry. Here. And is this the animation? No. Where's my animation here? Okay, I guess I must have animated at the object level. Right there. Okay. Losing my mind. Okay, so yeah, it's animated here at the object level. So let's just take a look at how this will affect it. And there's our plow right there. So let's just pull this back a little bit. And that should update. Since we're on the keyframe, it should update automatically. Great. Cool. Let me just see how far we go down here. All the way through. Yeah. Great. And these should all, this is just linear, which I kind of found was important. It felt like it needed to be linear. So let's go into this sim again, and let's take a look at this attract noise here. So I'm going to turn off the display as spheres just so we can see the points themselves. And so we added this attraction weight. The reason that we were adjusting this is because if you look at the kind of the clumping parameter, that is the attraction weight. So if we look at this vellum snow, it has a uniform attraction weight. And so what we were doing was we were taking we had traction weight here, and it's not uniform anymore. Now it's noisy, so we're getting a little bit of varied attraction between those particles, right? So that's one way of kind of doing this. And I was kind of playing around with like, how can we get this to look clumpy and kind of chunky? And I believe if we take this, I'm going to turn that off, and let's go back to the display as spheres. We'll just look at this. Oh, in fact, I think I cached it out, so that's great. So I should be able to just animate this and see kind of the simulation going here. And there it is. It's going to look a little different because I changed the plow. And we're getting some noise in there and stuff, and that's fine. Because we have some varied attraction weights and things like that. But I really want to get it to be even kind of chunkier and have these like slabs in there, right? So I was thinking about that today, actually, a little bit before the stream, and like, how can I do that exactly? So I think what we're going to do, and what I played around with this a little earlier, just like kind of during some downtime I had during the day. And I think the best way to do this is with actual constraints. Because what we can do is we can set our constraints, obviously, to be as kind of solid as we want them to be. We can break them if needed, or if we want to have some sort of breaking condition. There's some stuff there that we can do, right? So what I'm going to do is actually kind of remove this section here. We can just kind of pull this off to the side. I'm just going to shake it, bring it off to the side here. So now we're back to having this Vellum solver with just a uniform attraction weight across all of them. So they're all at 0.75. And this is actually going to work fine for what we're going to do here, because we're going to kind of take a different route, right? So we have this, we have this object here that is going to be our, that's kind of the shape that's generating our snow particles, right? So what I want to do instead is I'm going to take a grid, and I'm going to use this, and I'm going to use another match size because it's just so handy. I'm going to put this into it, and now we can see that I have my my grid here, right? So it's trying to match its size to this object, or it's trying to at least align it to that object. And I can do this scale to fit, and it will scale it to within, to fit it within this bound. But I'm going to turn off uniform scale, because this will give us kind of our a plane that we can work with a little bit easier than worrying about trying to delete face from this box. So if anything changed here from our input geometry, this would still fit to the bounds of it, right? So we'll just say, fit to bounds. Great. So that's all well and good. The only thing I want to do here is I want to set this to minimum as well, so it sits on the ground plane, right? You could have it raised up a little bit, but we're just going to keep it on the ground plane. That should be good. So let's take this and let's do a scatter on it, right? So now we have points on it. Let's do something not quite so crazy. Let's do like 50 maybe, and I'm going to turn the relax iterations down, so maybe it's not so smooth, maybe like 2 for right now. And if you're not familiar with Voronoi cells, we're going to use kind of that concept here. So there's a couple different ways that we could go about doing this, right? So let's first talk about the SOPs way of kind of getting this to work. So let's do an enumerate. This is a nice little node to add an attribute kind of per ID. I've used this before. I'm going to change this to points. Yep, there we go. And we are going to just call this ID. And so now we have an ID here for all these points, and they should go up to 49. Of course they do. So great. So we've got that. Let's take this and let's take this ID attribute and put it over onto these Vellum points, right? So let's do an attribute transfer. So this is going to be all SOPs, right? So we've got the geometry to move the attribute to, which is this, and then this is where we're pulling the attribute from. And so by default, we probably won't see too much happening here, but there should be a little bit happening already. So let's first of all just uncheck primitives. You don't need to worry about that. Let's just do the ID to make sure that's the only thing it's copying. And so we'll use this conditions here, right? So first of all, we've got our distance threshold set, and we can leave it right there for now, but we're going to play with this a little bit. So let's hit the I here and let's do ID. Select that and make sure this is on. And okay, now you can see that we're starting to generate some voronoi type patterns here. This really is the idea, right, of voronoi. So if we take this here, these points, and we look at this laid on top of it, we can see that there are, you know what, let me see here. Let me just visualize that a little bit larger because those are a little on the small side. Give me 1 second here. Change this in a while. Is that going to? Yes, that's it. Let's just set this to 6. We'll just double the size of it. Okay, so there's our points, right? So you can see that they have their colors all set to them, right? And so when we switch over to this, we will see that these should correlate directly to this, like this light kind of goldenrod color here is going to correlate to this whole cell. And basically, if you haven't done this before, it's just the closest distance. So there's going to be a line that of basically there's a border that's going to be drawn as a line between these 2 points here. And that's kind of the idea of Voronoi fracture, Voronoi cells, you know, that type of a thing. So you're using scatter points to kind of create these cells. So anyways, we've got this attribute here, right? So we've now moved this over, and now this ID is sitting on these vellum points. But what we could do, actually, let's change one thing here. Let's change this to piece, just because that's going to be a little bit of a better term for us. So let's actually do that. We'll change this to piece. Oops. I can type. There we go. All right. So instead, this will be named piece. We'll just change this to piece. Viz piece here. Piece. There we go. All right. Now we're back. So now we're just going to call these piece attributes, right? So these are the actual pieces, and that's just kind of a standard naming convention within Houdini. So we're just going to use that just since that's something that we're used to, and should work fine for our purposes and things like that. So, all right, so we've got our conditions here. So we can turn this down, right? Nothing happens for a while until we start getting it lower enough to start seeing these distances actually kind of shrink down, right? And the one thing that you'll notice here is that when you have these large, you get these really nice voronoi kind of patterns. But as the distance goes down, they turn into spheres, because when it's under that distance between them, they start to get spherical, or, you know, in this case, like a disc of points. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of depth to it, but it's maybe more cylindrical is more of a better term for what the shape it's making. But so unfortunately, we can't just shrink those voronoi cells with something like this. So this was kind of what started me down the trail of like, oh, I could just do this. And as I was reducing the size here, I'm like, this isn't going to be the best way of doing this, right? So what we could do now is we could take this, right? And we have this attribute transfer, and this will kind of go to answer Coco's question from a little bit earlier about the for each SOP. So let's actually do that and see what we might affect with this, right? So let's do for each connected piece. Now we don't need this connectivity. We're going to get rid of that. We'll put this into here. So this is now our for each loop. And this is just going to loop over some sort of a piece attribute. So instead of class, I'm going to set this to piece. And instead of primitives, I'm going to say points. So now this is working the way we want it to. It's iterating over 50 different elements, and we can go through here and look at our single passes. It's going to pull in each of those individual chunks. Now they're kind of random and scattered. That's just because the scatter node is set to, let's see here, randomize the point order. So if you unchecked that, might be a little bit more standardized maybe instead of, let's see. Yeah, it's a little less chaotic when you turn off randomized point order. So if we did that and looked through it, it's going to feel a little more ordered, right? It's a little bit more orderly, but anyways, because this is randomized, this, as we go through the single pass, is going to be a little bit more scattered around. So anyways, so we have our single pass that we can now pull, right? And so from there, we could do something like, let's let's just do a connect adjacent pieces here. And we could do something like this and have them like an adjacent points, right? So there's all the points. Do the search radius a little farther, maybe. There we go. It was just a little bigger than I was expecting it to be. All right, let me turn off this visualizer so we can just see these grids. In fact, I'm going to turn this to gray just so we can see it maybe a little bit better. All right, so we've got this grid of points, or of these, like this lattice of kind of connections. And if we did this in the for each loop here, we'll see that all these chunks are going to be put together. They aren't going to have these little gaps they're going to have gaps in between them because those will not connect. So we could use these as Vellum constraints, right? So that's one way that we could kind of go about doing this. If we look at this, they should still have those attributes attached to them. Here, the primitives don't have the attributes, but the points do. So we're still seeing that visualized there. So this is one way that we could kind of go about doing this, right? But it's a little bit limited in some ways, right? So if we were to reduce this distance here again to maybe something like, let's go back up here to 1, maybe even less. Let's do 0.5 or maybe 0.6. Let's do that. So we've got some that are kind of connected and some that aren't. So let's look at what this does. And I think you'll kind of imagine what's about to happen here, that each of these points is, getting connected and stuff. Now, this background kind of where there is no closest point, we'd have to go in and make sure that we're giving that some sort of a piece number that isn't going to get hopefully fed into this for each loop. Now, if we look at what that attribute is there, let's just select those just so we can see. And I'm just going to say only show selected. So what piece number is this? Yep, these are all -1. So unfortunately, that's getting read in as its own unique piece, and it's getting connected. So that's kind of unfortunate. Don't always really want that to happen. But in this case, we're going to do something different anyways, but you can see that there is definitely a disconnect here between those. So if you wanted to use this as some sort of constraints for your Vellum simulation, you could. But let's talk about maybe a different way of doing this, right? Let's see if we can come up with a different way of kind of going about doing this. So we could do actually a very similar process through something like a VOP, right? So let's do that and see if we can't get sort of the same output here, right, as this attribute transfer. We'll talk a little bit about some of what these do here. So if we do a point VOP, we should be able to get the exact same kind of output from it. So we'll take this. The first port is going to be all of. Now these are maybe a little too big. Let's just do that to 4 maybe instead. So the first port is obviously going to be what we iterate over, and then this is going to be where we get this enumeration attribute from. So if we jump inside of here, we're going to be able to do a couple things from the start. So let's first grab the closest point to the closest point from this first, from the second input, I should say. In computer speak, that's input 1, because this is input 0. So, all right, so let's do that. Let's do, oops, that's weird. Let's do near point. So this is the node that's going to get us the nearest point, and we are going to use input 2 as that, and we're going to grab the current position. Let me turn that off. I don't think we want that. All right, so now we have this near point, right? So what we could do is when you're in these, in a VOP, you want to put an attribute out, you do a bind export. So we're going to do a bind export, and we're going to put this into the parameter here, and we'll just rename this something like near PT, right? So if we look at this now, we can see that this near PT is going to be pretty similar to, or basically the exact same as what we had before. Now, before we had the ID, if I turn this all the way back up, we'll see that this should look exactly the same as this, right? So now we have that piece number. In this case, it's called near PT. So we're using this near point here to basically look up one of these inputs at a specific position and find the nearest point to that, right? So that is giving us this near point position, and that's great. We've got that all set up. And if we wanted to do that instead in VEX, we can, sorry, I'm just trying to move this out of the way so I can slide these over. If we want to do that in VEX or in a point wrangles, we'll just do that real quick too, to kind of talk about what that looks like. So here's, here's this, and here is this. And so in here, we're just going to say, we want to find the near point basically of the first input. So we're going to say, we're going to just make a variable first. So we'll say, we're going to say int near PT equals, and we'll say near point. It's going to autofill. And now we're going to get a little pop-up that basically tells us what we need to call in this VEX function. And so the first thing that we need to look at here is this geometry. Whenever you see this, that just is asking you, give the index, the integer value of the input that you want to call. So if you called 0, that would be the current, points that you're working over. If you call 1, that's the second input. So I know it's a little weird, but that's kind of computer sciencey stuff. So we're going to say near point of 1, and then we're going to say v at key, because that's going to give us the position. Anytime we use at, that's getting an attribute. So we're getting the vector of position, which is just at p. So we're calling for the p attribute. So now we have this integer near PT. Nothing looks like it happened yet because we just stored this in this node. Anytime you store something like this, an integer, it's only going to work in this wrangle. And once you get past it, it's not going to be there anymore. So it's something to keep in mind. So if you want to write that out and not just use it within your wrangle, now you could do this. You could just say I at near PT like this, and we're going to get near PT written out just like that. So these are all now doing basically the same exact thing. And maybe instead of calling these near PT, we could just say piece like this. And here we can do the same thing. We'll just make sure they're all the same. Why not? Okay, so there's I at piece. So what I like to do, we're going to work on some other stuff here to kind of tweak this a little bit and maybe make this a little bit nicer. So instead of saying I at piece, let's say, go back to the int and we'll call this near PT. And then we'll come down here and do I at piece equals near PT. And that just might seem like a little bit of extra work, but the nice thing about this is that if you're doing other things on near PT in between, it'll write that out now instead of, just doing it at the beginning. And then if you tweak that or did anything, you wouldn't be able to adjust that. So it's always kind of nice to have at least I think in the way I write my code, I like to kind of work on stuff and then write it out, at the end. Just a little bit cleaner way of doing it, I think. So, I should say I'm not like the best computer programmer by a mile because I've only been doing this as long as I've learned Houdini. So for me, computer science is a new thing. So don't feel like, oh my gosh, I should have gone to school for computer science and blah, blah, blah. No, it's not the case. Oh, and I forgot to give my little, speech spiel thing at the beginning of the stream. But if you guys have any questions or any suggestions or any ideas of how to do something better than what I'm showing, I would love to hear it. Don't feel like I'm trying to say this is the only way or the best way to do this. You can already see that I'm showing 3 different ways of doing the exact same thing. And that's common in Houdini. There's lots of different ways you can get to the end result that you want. There's positives and negatives maybe to each way of doing it. But in this case, we have a lot of different things that we can do here. So please, if you have any ideas or suggestions for something I could do that I'm doing that seems not right, or if I'm struggling with something and you're like, hey, I know the answer to that, great. I'd love to hear it. This isn't me telling you how to use Houdini. I'd like this, I always like this to be more of a conversation between all of us. So always open to suggestions, thoughts, ideas, whatever. So yes, thanks. Oh, and Coco, I hope that if you're still on the stream, that I was able to kind of. Oh, you were talking about the current iteration number. The way that I would do that. Sorry, I'm just gonna jet off of this since we have these all. I just want to answer Coco's question here real quick. So I usually just create this meta import node here. And on this, you can get a couple of different things pretty easily here. You can get the iteration, the number of iterations, and the value. I forget how the value gets considered here, because it doesn't seem like, let me just check something here. Let me just do a single pass and do like the fourth pass here. Just want to see if this changes at all. Yeah, iteration and value. Yeah, so interesting. I think because it's an integer, it's the same number there. But anyways, okay, so if we wanted to get the iteration in some situation here, and let's just say I wanted to give each of these like an iteration number for whatever reason, I can just do this with anything. I can do like a point. I'll do a point wrangle since he asked about a inside of a wrangle. But so here's my point wrangle, and I'm just gonna say int iteration equals, and then I'm going to do ch, or yep, I'm going to do ch, and then actually, I'm just thinking here. Because it's an attribute, not a parameter. All right, so what I can do here, sorry, instead I can do detail, if I could type, and I'm going to get that from the geometry node. So I'm going to do // which means we're going up a level, and we're going to look for the is that? Oh, right, that's looking at the geometry coming in here. Okay, so what I can do is I can just take this, put it into here, and that'll work better. So now I'm going to say the detail of 1, and I'm going to get the iteration attribute. So this is the detail attribute, and then I'm just going to do 0, which is kind of just a throwaway value, and I have to put a semicolon there or else it's not going to be happy with me. So now we should have that. That should be good. So that's getting that detail attribute. And if I wanted to just write that out, for example, I could do I at iter and just call, use the iteration here. And now I should have iter. It's the same as the piece in this case, but, you know, if it was somehow different, it would just be the iteration value for that. So here I'm pulling in the detail attribute from this meta import node, and those values are there. You could also pull in something like, instead of iteration, we could say num iterations. So let's do that just to show you that this isn't just some similar thing, num iterations. And now instead of it being whatever 4 and all that stuff, it's just going to be 50 the whole way down. So that's basically just saying all of these have 50. Going to bed now. It's 3 a.m. in Belgium. Wow. You are glad to have you on the stream. And yeah, glad to have you watching from Belgium. So yeah, get some sleep. 3 a.m. Man, trooper. It is only 8:40 on the East Coast, so of the United States. So it's a little early here still. So not quite my bedtime yet. So yeah, so hopefully, Coco, that answers your question, and gives you some ideas on how to maybe do that with yours. The other thing you could do as well, is instead of doing it this way, Ah, yes, yes, yes. Wow, Orient 610. Man, you guys are troopers. You guys are early. Either early birds or super late night owls. One more thing that you could do here too, just for the sake of argument or sake of thoroughness, you could do so we could say, instead, you could do this and say equals ch. We'll just say chs. No, is it a string? No, it's not a string. It's an integer. And it's going to be, we'll just call this iteration, maybe value or something like that. So it's just, you'll see this is just going to make an extra. So when I hit this little button here, it's going to make this iteration value integer. So now whatever I set that to is going to be our number. You can see down there it's changing. But what we could do here instead is we could type in detail here and parentheses, and we can see here that we just need to say what surface node, the attribute name, and the index. So the index is going to be 0. In fact, I think it's always, no, it's not always 0. It could, if it's a vector attribute, it could be different. But since this is an integer, it's going to be 0. So what we can do is now, if we do this, this is the right way of doing this. We can double slash, we can say for each, we'll get the metadata node. We'll do, I don't know, we'll just do iteration here. Oops. Premature enter, we'll do 0. So now we have this detail. We're getting this from the for each metadata, and I'm going to undo single pass just so you can see that this is actually working. And if we go look through our iterations, they're going to be matching to the piece number in this case. But yeah, super night owls. So anyways, that is the way that you would get those attributes there. So just something to keep in mind, that there's a couple different ways you could do that. A lot of times I like adding the spare parameters here, but you don't have to. You can hard code it in there. So sometimes I like seeing that something like that is getting pulled in before it gets pulled in. There might be a little performance hit there. I'm actually not 100% sure. And that was actually another interesting question that we had in the chat was, is there any difference in performance here? Let's take a look. Yeah. So interestingly, I'm just looking at these cook numbers here, and they might not be completely accurate, but it's kind of fascinating. So it's saying that this attribute transfer is taking 1.56 milliseconds, so pretty quick. The point VOP is taking 4.72 milliseconds, and the point wrangle is taking 0.03 milliseconds. So that just is one of the real benefits of using a wrangle, is that you're doing super low level coding basically. And just as an aside, let's just right click on this and go to the VEX VOPs options. And here you can see this is what the code that the point VOP is writing out. It wrote all this code out for us, which is great, except that it's a lot of lines of code. How many lines is this? 192 lines of code versus 3. So I'm assuming that's where the time difference is coming in. The other thing that's happening here in this attribute transfer is that it has all these distance thresholds, sample counts, kernels, blending, all this stuff is added in there. So that's why that's going to take a little bit longer. The point VOP, I think, is just taking longer because there's a lot of other things in the code. But anyways, so let's just try something that I was kind of trying to figure out before and see if we can get it working. So instead of just doing something like this, where as it comes down, they turn into circles like this, I was kind of thinking it might be interesting to, I don't know, do something where it gets kind of noisier towards the edge. So it kind of breaks up as you get to the edge of that cell. So yeah, I'm just going to try to think about how we could do that. So what we could do instead, let's maybe try this in the point VOP first, because we might be able to kind of prototype this a little bit easier in here. So let's think about what's happening here, right? So we've got these points here that all exist and we're getting distances to them. And we want to, get closer to them. And so instead of, distances here that are basically saying which piece are we closest to, we almost want to try to figure out what the distances are here, I think, between each of these, and then make some thresholds based on that. It's definitely tricky. This is a tricky one. So actually, maybe before we dive into this, let me show you the next option that I came up with that I think is actually kind of a cool compromise of some of these elements. And it is actually all SOP based. So I'm going to show this last one. And this, I think, might be the simplest and best way of doing it. And then we'll come back and play around with some of these VEX and wrangle kind of nodes. And if you guys have any other questions, you can always drop them in the chat. Anything else about Houdini or what we're doing or anything like that. So always welcome. So instead of doing it this way, an interesting way of doing it is taking this and turning this into a voronoi fracture, right? So we've got our geometry to fracture and we've got our points, which would be right here. So now we've got that same thing, but in geometry, right? And what we could do here, I'm just going to move these over a little bit. Hopefully won't make too big of a mess here. Is we can take this and we're going to do a for each piece. Do we have pieces here? I'm not sure if we did. Yeah, we have names for all of these. So we can definitely do that. We don't need this connectivity thing here just to add more onto it. So instead of this going over class, we can go over name. That should work. Just see, yep, sure enough, same thing. Okay, so from here, what we're going to do is we're going to take a transform node and just do a simple expression in here, because if we just scaled these down like this, right, 8, and let's just do 0.8, right, it's just going to scale the whole thing down. It's going to do them each one at a time, right? So it's going to scale it in a single pass, but it's going to scale them all from the same origin, basically. So instead of that, let's change the pivot as we go through each of these pieces. So what we can do is we can do centroid. Oops. There's centroid. And you might have seen me use this before. It's a nice little thing that you can use, nice little expression. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an op input path. So this is just going to get the path to whatever's the input here. And we're going to use this example basically right here where it says dot in parentheses and 0. That just basically means the path to whatever's coming into this node. So we're going to do dot or quotations with a dot in between. And then we'll do 0 like that. So that's going to give us the op input path, the input path to this node. And then from there, we're going to get the centroid and we're going to say d underscore x. And that is the, right here it says should be one of dx, dy, or dz for the corresponding components of the centroid. So now that should give us the x centroid. And if we just select this, copy it, and then come down here, paste that and change it to dz, we'll see that this is now scaling based on the centroid of these cells. So as I change this, you'll see that it's actually going to scale based on the centroid of these pieces and not, based on the whole object or whatever. So it's just scaling those individual pieces. So what we could do now with this is we could take this geometry and we could make a group from this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this group and I'm going to put it on the vellum points. Let's just move this down a little here. So we've got this group. We're taking this geometry, putting it here. And instead of doing this from the base group, we're going to turn that off because that usually makes them all. And here we will say chunks. Kind of weird name, but whatever. I guess it should work. So we've got chunks. We're going to do a bounding region and we're going to say bounding object. And this should There we go. Just wasn't visualizing it. So now we have all of those in our groups, right? So if we, yeah, that should work just fine. So now we have these nice kind of big chunks here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a vellum constraint right there. And we're going to do a glue constraint. We're going to do this from a point group to a point group. So we're going to say chunks to chunks. And instead of this, which is kind of stinks, this guide geometry, like it's really fast otherwise, I'm just going to do a null here. So I can see right in here, I can see the lines that it's making. Might be a little hard to see in that case. Maybe instead we will go back to, yeah, that's should be okay, hopefully, to see. Might be a little tough to see, but okay. So we can see that there's some lines starting to be made in there. And so what we can do is we can adjust the search distance here. So we can maybe up that a little bit more. I don't know, we'll do 0.5. And we'll do a few more here. I think I ended up with 7, and that was a pretty good amount. So now you can see we've got these chunks of, constraints made, and the rest of them don't have constraints. So that's kind of neat and interesting. What? That's really weird. What is going on there? Really weird. Okay. I don't know what happened there. That was really strange. Okay. So we have our our constraints set up here, and we have our null. I'm just going to get rid of that. We don't really need to worry about that too much. And so now if we simulate this, let's take a look at what is going to happen here. So I'm just going to, I'm going to iterate this, just version this up one, and say save to disk and background. And we'll let this start to roll. Give it a second to load up the first frames here. There we go. Cool. So it should start to go. We should see some really big chunks here. They're going to be pretty rigid because this is set to completely stiff, which I should have not done that because they're going to literally be like rock hard. So yeah, that's going to be kind of interesting. Oh, that's right. I'm going to cancel this. I wanted to put that back to spheres so we can visualize it a little bit better maybe. Hello? Spheres? Should be a little easier to see this way. Fact, maybe we will go back to dark. Cool. All right, so let's take a look at what is going to happen here. I guess I'll just play through it. Do its thing. So these should be really rigid. In fact, you can kind of see the boundaries between them probably because they're so they're not going to move at all basically. So let's see what happens here. Yep, and there you go. You can see that these are like just big chunks that are basically getting pushed around. They're going to be kind of smushed a little bit, but honestly, they're going to probably ride on top of this big kind of wave of particles. There'll be some underneath. So now we've got these huge like chunks in here that are kind of getting pushed around, right? So let me turn this glue constraint down a little bit. I think I was playing around with it somewhere in like the 10,000. Maybe I'll change this up to 5. We'll go in between 10 and 100. So that should be a little better. And just trying to think of the other things that I wanted to set here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Maybe we'll just look at it. I don't know. It's kind of hard to see some of these things sometimes. All right, let's just do it from this angle. And we'll just do a little flip book and let it do its thing. So what we should be seeing is some chunks here of snow. As it kind of gets pushed around, there should be some rigid kind of shapes in there, and it should push those around and kind of break up and stuff. So let's see what happens. I can see some of them. Might be a little hard to see at some points, but I think they'll start to kind of stack up in this like snow plow getting pushed around. So they're going to almost look a little bit more like ice, maybe breaking up or whatever. Kind of a little bit maybe too rigid in this case, but hopefully it'll give you a little sense of how this could, work and integrate and stuff. But yeah, we're getting some big old chunks of whatever snow stuff happening here. The other thing that you might want to do is turn the attraction weight down a little bit. That might help as well. But yeah, you can see how this is like kind of making these big blocks of snow, kind of chunks of ice, whatever you might want to say in there. Now, these are obviously really rigid, and you'd probably want to adjust that quite a bit as far as like giving it a breaking threshold, which is really easily done right here. There's a few different types of breaking thresholds you can give it. So instead of it just being these big chunks, you could maybe have some, threshold in there for it to break and move around and stuff. So that could be a good kind of way to get some of that going in there. But you can obviously see kind of where this is headed and how it's, how it's working. Just going to stop it there. Can maybe take a look at this from some other angles and you can see, sure enough, there's that. Cool. And the other thing that you could look at is, we'll put another null down here. Just pipe that into the constraint geometry. And that's a little hard to see, so I'll just keep changing the background colors here. All right, there we go. So we can just look at this maybe, and this might be a little bit of an easier way to see some of these things. Cool, good, I'm glad. Yeah, it's just little things, little details, but this maybe lets you see a little bit better what's going on here, where you've got these chunks of constraints and there's pieces that are attached to that, right? So what I would say is if you wanted it to be a little bit more smaller pieces, for example, just up this, right? Because as you up this total count here, that's going to make smaller and smaller Voronoi cells. Maybe even do 250. Yeah, no problem, man. You're very welcome. Very welcome. This was just something I was playing around with today, so I was like, oh, this will be really cool, I think, to show. So now we have littler pieces, so this should feel a little bit more, I don't know, maybe like a solid, just going to make a new thing here. Maybe this will feel a little bit more like smaller chunks of snow or whatnot. The other thing too is the less smoothing that you do, or what is the word? I forgot the word for it, and now it's let me just hit escape here. The less of the relaxed iterations that you do, the less normal these are going to look. So if you do 1 here, it's going to get a little bit less and less, kind of uniform, right? So if you do something like this, you're going to get a little bit more of a noisy pattern to it. That kind of stuff. You can tweak some of these attributes, and some of these points will come, get closer together basically. So maybe even go 350. I don't know. But, you can get all these little pieces here, and then as you simulate this, let's see how this looks. It should hopefully be a little bit, a little bit more normal looking, with like bigger pieces of, bigger pieces of snow, but not so big that they're like these like icebergs that are in the snow or whatever. Let's go. What's happening here? There we go. One thing that you sometimes might want to do with your simulations is you could set like a quasi-static state at the beginning, and allow for it to kind of do that settling thing at the beginning. So if you do that, you can give it like maybe like 10 quasi-static frames to just let it kind of do its thing at the beginning, let it settle, and then you could simulate from there if you really needed to not have like a pre-roll or something, but a pre-roll is fine as well. So kind of a weird angle to look at it from. Sorry, I'm going to just change this a little bit just to see. We can see a little bit better here, and just reflip book it from down here. Yeah, that's starting to look kind of cool. So, it just really all depends on what the look of everything is, like what kind of a snowstorm, snow plow that you want to do, right? You're getting these little pieces here. The one thing I wanted to do is turn this back on just so we could see where that is. Okay. Possible to do with a clamp noise pattern. Yeah, that's a great question, KG. Yeah. Oh, hey, Crossfader, how's it going, man? KG just asked, he said no need to demo, but I kind of want to demo it now. Could you do it with a clamp noise pattern instead of the voronoi pattern? Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't. Yeah, that's exactly another way you could do it too. Yeah, you definitely could do it that way. Let me see here. Let's see what this snowplow, what we got going on here. Yeah, that's looking like kind of like a snowplow. Surprised I'm getting so much bounce at the very beginning there, but whatever. What are you gonna do? That's starting to look like some chunks of ice in a snowplow. Get a nice snowpack going, Kind of looks like it. Yeah, I think that's a great question, KG. Let's take a look at that, because that really is. Well, yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, you definitely could, Crossfader. I mean, so, what I was doing in order to get this was, this isn't obviously a rigid body. This is a Vellum simulation. So it's a little bit different the way you would maybe go about doing that. You could certainly do some breaking kind of like thresholds and things like that. And like stresses and things like that in order to break them a little bit more. let me just turn that on and see what we could get there. So here's your Vellum constraints. If we turn on this threshold, let's try it with. Yeah, let's try it with this. I'm gonna set this to maybe like 10 to start with. I don't know. That's a guess, but we can watch this view and see kind of how these change, right? So this is going to give it a breaking threshold here. So let's see what happens here. We'll let it roll through. There's probably other ways that I could secondarily fracture those pieces and make them smaller. Yeah, just trying to think of what that might exactly look like. So one of the tricky things here is that because you're going with you want there to be rigidity, but also breaking. It can get a little tricky. We really love watching paint dry. Yeah, I know, right? So what's happening here, and the reason that this is looking a bit different is because when you have the breaking threshold on, it's actually breaking based on the stresses that are getting put into it. And so it's almost like those chunks are getting like weakened to the point where they can just bend more or less. So they're not holding together. So that's the tricky part here. Let me see if I can up this a bit more. 20, maybe. Try that. You can see that they're breaking in there. They're kind of slowly going away and turning into more of a powdery kind of a thing. Yeah, it's interesting. Hmm. Because really, what we would want it to be um, isn't so much based on the stretch. It would be more based on the impact, right? Because really, this is made more for cloth, I would say. Um, and so, because of that, it's kind of a tearing threshold, really more so than a breaking threshold. I'm trying to think about this for a second. Let me look at the instead of doing this with the voronoi stuff, let me look at like a noise, like a clamp, KG was talking about. Let me look at the clamp noise thing because I want to think about that a little bit. I feel like there's a way to get maybe build a custom solver type of a thing. All right, so instead of the voronoi fracture, let's go back up here and let's just try something a little different again. So we don't need that. This is turning into a mess. My apologies. Oh, hello. So let's do this. Pull this down here. We actually don't need this null. So let's do this. We've got this noise that we had built before, and that is attraction weight. We remapped it here. And what we could do with this remap is yeah. So let's just do this with a wrangle. We'll just do it. This is going to be pretty simple to write with a wrangle. So basically, we've got this remap attraction attribute here. This should be on the points. And we're just going to use this attraction weight to drive those chunks, basically, instead. So let's do a point wrangle here. And we want to make a chunks group, basically. So what we're going to say is if, make an if statement, if at attraction, it's all one word, weight is greater than I'm just going to say threshold because I'm going to make that in that attribute. So if we want it like that, we're going to say I at, and we'll do group underscore and say chunks. You can't see that. Chunks like that. Group chunks equals 1. So it's going to say, hey, we don't have threshold. And they're right. We don't. So let's do a float thresh equals, and then we'll do ch, say noise threshold like this, and we'll make that attribute. And now this should set our group, hopefully. Let's turn this off and turn this on, change it to points, and we should have our group. And sure enough, there's our chunks. So, oh, you know what it is? We want it to be the other way. So we'll do less than, and we'll get those pieces maybe instead. So we could do something like this, more or less. Yeah, this will be interesting. See how this looks. Not 100% sure what this is going to look like, but now what we should have is where those, now we should have all these little crazy things kind of fit through here like this. So it's a little bit more natural seeming. We can kind of tweak this to our heart's content, but we'll just do it like that. Let's see. I'm going to turn... I'm definitely going to need the breaking threshold on at some level. So let's do this at like 40, let's just say. Let's go kind of crazy with it, because I want it to break if it goes far enough, but not if it, if it's just a little bit. So let's see. Let's see what this looks like. Not sure. We should have some chunks in here, but the question is, how will they react and what's going to happen here? Because they are technically probably way more connected across the whole thing. There aren't gaps in between them anymore, so that's kind of a little different. But could work, could work on some level. So we'll see how this looks. Feels like it's like all one sheet now because there's not really any like good breaks in it, maybe. Like it just feels like it's all very connected, which it is. Yeah, I mean, so you can do it. I mean, it's just going to have a really different look, and you have to play around with obviously the noise attributes and things like that. But this is the same thing, just with a noise attribute instead. Kind of, I don't know. There's something about it that feels like almost like scrambled eggs or something really weird to me now. I don't know what I'm seeing or thinking. It's kind of like a little bit grossing me out on some level, but it was interesting, I guess. If you want some weird Vellum simulation, it's certainly something. Looks tasty now. Yeah, it's like we're frying something up. It's a little weird because like the white parts all want to like stick together, and the black part is just particles that are kind of sticky but not like hard stuck to each other. So it's really interesting. It's kind of grossing me out on some level. I don't know, but it's interesting. So there you go. There's your answer. Yes, you can, but it really changes the look of it, obviously. Anyways, so we'll just move back to this. So I don't have to look at that grossness anymore. The other thing that kind of helps too is if you change the size of this, like if you do 0.6, let's just say instead. Okay, yep. Multiple periods here, right? Hey, Sam, how's it going? Hey, I think I've seen you Sam, do you do tutorials on YouTube? I feel like I've seen your tutorials on Twitter. I feel like you do. At least the name is the same, if not, but welcome. If you do. So anyways, this might be a little bit less of like a big Sam does. There we go. There's the answer. Thank you. Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, so this should be a little bit less of like a sheet and a little more chunky and stuff like that. Used to be called Think Particle. Cool. Well, welcome. Very, very nice to have you with us. So that's something interesting that you could do there. And this is obviously going to be, there's going to be less of the chunks and more of the kind of the loose-ish kind of sticky particles, kind of flying around and stuff. So yeah, so that should be a little bit less of, just one, these big kind of icebergy chunks and a little bit more, small pieces that are just going to kind of live inside of there and kind of break up the simulation a little bit from that standpoint. So, yeah, so that's one thing. And then I think Lucas was saying about secondary like breaks and things like that. And that's certainly a really interesting idea, right? Like it's like, I think you're going to have to do a custom little bit of code there to, little extra stuff. That's kind of cool. That's definitely working. Got the sticky snow, and then we've got our big chunks in there. So that's kind of cool. Yeah, this is going to work. It's looking nice. Starting to look a little better. So let's look at that. So I'm going to turn the scatter back down, maybe back to 50. And I'm going to turn the scale of these individual pieces back up to 8. Oops. Okay. So now we've got back to these kind of big voronoi chunks. I'm going to... Actually, I will need that, so let's leave that open. All right. So what I want to check on is if there's any attributes here that I can work with in order to could you hold the fractured data with a second voronoi pattern over the main shapes? Yeah, I mean, certainly you could, yes. I think the question really becomes... So yeah, you definitely could do that. You could definitely take your actual pieces and, like when you're doing this fracture here and you're scaling it and doing all this stuff, you could certainly run a second voronoi fracture over this, right? That would be fairly straight. We can do that pretty quickly. So, what I would do instead is just add that into here. So I would kind of do the same thing. I would take another grid, another scatter. I don't think we actually need to enumerate it. So let's just copy these. Sorry, this is becoming a mess. My apologies. I usually like to work a lot neater than this, but hey, here we are. Okay, so I'm going to move this over here. Cool. All right, so we've got this grid. We're going to fit to bounds of this. So this should fit the grid to the bounds of the current object. We can scatter based on that and then use that to voronoi fracture. So I'll just grab the same guy here, this, and points into there, and this here, and that should voronoi fracture it, just like that, right? And then what you would need to do is... Oh, that might be messy. I'm just trying to think of maybe the best way to do this. Like you could just do this same little thing here and scale those down again, basically, to scale those pieces down a little bit. And then you'd have a secondary fracture in that main fracture. The only problem is that's not really going to hold on anymore. A lot of times in the, what is it? in the RBD material fracture. The reason that this works kind of the way it does, I'll just show you this real quick, is that if you take, that's the grid, that's the wrong thing. That's not what I want. I want this over here. Oops. I want this object. So if we take this and we fracture it, right? Here's this fracture. Fracturing via concrete, and great, all good. So what we're going to actually see here is if we look at this first fracture, it has, for the constraints, there's a level multiplier here, which isn't maybe, when you said a glue constraint. Yeah. So the problem is that the constraints in Vellum work a little bit differently than like a glue constraint would. On that, I think they want to, at least in this instance of it, we could if we were doing it not in the SOP space stuff, we could probably get in and tweak it a little bit more. But so yeah, you could certainly do what is being done here and have different strengths of the connections and stuff like that. But the Vellum glue constraint is a little different because it doesn't have a breaking threshold based on collisions. It has a breaking threshold based on stretching. So that is kind of the big difference between the two. But I think we can create a solver to fix that inside of the Vellum thing, which will hopefully fix that. So I'm going to do that in a second. But so the idea here is that if you look at the constraint geometry, yeah. So I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's why we're seeing some of that stuff. But what you see here is that there's kind of two different levels of strength. There's going to be your main connections, and let's just do this null here. They'll be probably randomized a bit, but there should be your, let's just do this. Let's do less primary fractures. Let's do like, yeah, Vellum grains aren't too bad. They're really similar to like how you would work with like pops, like particles. They just have some extra stuff to help them like act sticky or, you know, have constraints and things like that, which it's a little bit more built into it, I feel like, than the pops stuff is. I mean, I guess you could do that in pops as well. It's just there's some better collision stuff and things like that. So it's got some better collision setup to it than the standard grain particles do. All right, so I'm going to do 3 scatter points there and do like 10 here. We should see some difference here. And let me do a RBD exploded view. And that should hopefully give us a little bit better idea of what's actually happening here. If I could, now I've got nodes on top of nodes. Go away. Oh yeah, this is going great, guys. I know how to use Houdini. Okay. Anyways, just gotta get that error away. It's driving me nuts. We good? We good? No? Still got an error? Where's that error? So if you ever get an annoying error like this and you want it to go away, you just have to find it. Yeah, curveballs are fun. That's okay. That's why I do this, man. That's what I'm here for. I like the curveballs. It keeps me thinking on my toes. What is happening here? Okay, we're just going to do a new one. Usually you can go inside and find that error and fix it, but we're just going to do a new one. Exploded view. Yeah, let's crossfader. All right, so we do this. We can show the constraints. What we should be able to do is visualize these constraints based on... maybe not. That's weird. But anyways, you can see here that there's different strengths. Basically, there's really high ones, or there's ones that are in like the thousands. So there's ones that are around 10,000 and ones that are around 1,000. Let's just call it that. Or maybe higher than 10,000. Some of them are in the 80,000s. So there's kind of 2 steps there, and that's why they break differently at different, you know, fracture levels, basically. So anyways, that's how the RBD material stuff works. But back down here to our Vellum solver. Let's see where we were at. So I just want to get a couple frames simmed here. So we've got the sim started up and everything. We have our constraint geometry we're looking at here, but I want the actual Vellum points. And the one thing you might notice is that under... Oh, was I looking at that? It's somewhere else? Maybe it's not here. Sorry, my bad. It's not here. But what we have are maybe only certain attributes getting brought out here. Now, there are hit positions, all these different things here. Force, so that's good. Let's actually might be able to just work with that. Just see if we can't see any force attributes here. No force. Let's see if we can see anything on this constraint geometry. Yeah, see, all they have is this stress attribute, and that's really the stretching property of those constraints. So what we need is something, we'll go back to the Vellum geometry. We need something that's going to give us, if these are like hitting, they're colliding basically. Hit number, hit normal, hit position, hit V. Do we got anything here? No. Nothing. Last position. Previous position. I don't know what the difference is there, unless that's something different. P last. Oh, that's not what I was hoping for. All right, so we're gonna come in here and take a look at what we can, if we can see anything in here that's gonna help us out. So we're inside of the actual dynamics world now. You can see that's changed up here. So we're not in SOPs anymore. We're in we're in DOPs technically. I'm just gonna look at the geometry here and just make sure it's not hiding any attributes from us up at that higher level. So let's see. Not sure what those mean. Looks like all the same attributes. Sometimes what happens is there's a DOP network inside of the Vellum solver, right? So if you look at this, this is actually what's happening inside of the Vellum solver. And our inputs are up at the top here. So these are our 3 inputs coming in. There's a DOP net in between, and then the geometry comes out, and then they output the data back to those 3 outputs that we had. So like here is the first output 0. Here's output 1. That's the pink one. And then there should be another one here. Where is it? That's weird. Apparently that doesn't come out. Oh, maybe it just passes right through. Let me see. Yeah, there it is. It literally just, that's all that happens in here between for the collision geometry. So literally nothing happens to the collision geometry on this stream. Literally nothing. It gets pulled in, but it doesn't, nothing gets adjusted on inside. So anyways, yeah, so I was thinking maybe there were some attributes they were deleting in there just to clean it up. But alas, oh, that's where I was seeing those attributes. In here, when you save it, it cleans up the attributes. And I was thinking that happened in the Vellum solver. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have any hit attributes, because what I would do if I had, I'll just kind of talk you through what I was thinking. If I had a hit attribute or some sort of a force attribute that was saying how hard these things were hitting, just like if you were in rigid bodies, you could do that, where as it hits at a certain velocity, you could have something happen, right? So in this case, what I would do is look up the points force, like how much force is being applied. And depending on if, let's just say both points averaged together were over a certain amount, we would basically just delete that primitive that's holding those together, that constraint primitive. So there should be a way to do that, unless this DP is something to do with the force, but I don't think it is. I feel like that's something to do with like calculus or something. My math is weak, but I feel like that's what that is, but it might not be. Actually, that seems fishy that those are all exactly at 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3. Yeah, that seems weird. I don't know what's going on with this TP, but that's the only thing that seems to be like maybe close. Because like this force would be great if I could use that, but it's not. There's nothing. Anyways, I think the force would be if you put a pop in here. Like if we did a pop wind, just for example, I'm just going to make this absolutely insane for a second. But if we put a pop wind in here, that would be the force that would be acting on it. So if we did that and just gave some random forces, we should, if we hit play, right, because it doesn't initialize it until after the first frame. So now with all of these getting blown around, we should have maybe some forces in here, possibly. Or not. Yeah, sure, just make me a total liar. Oh, I know why, because I'm probably looking at the wrong thing, maybe? Yep, there it is. Okay, let's see. Do we have any forces? No, of course not. Why would we have forces? I swear sometimes Houdini just likes to make me look like an idiot. I really thought that's what that was. Anyways, not going to work for that. So I'll have to think about that a little bit. But that's a great question, Crossfader. Like that, I would want to do that where it breaks a little bit better. You could do it with, unfortunately, with only these. The breaking within Vellum really only works with these three things: stress, distance, stretch, stress, stretch, distance, stretch ratio. So yeah, those are the only options right now. So yeah, so that's kind of how that gets limited a little bit right now. But all right, I think I'm going to leave it kind of where we're at there and not worry too much more about that because I kind of liked the look that we were getting there. It was okay looking. And I'm going to make this maybe just a little smaller so that it's not so crazy. Oh, yeah, let me do 20. Yeah, that's perfect. Misclick. Good old escape key. About 250 instead of 2500. Thanks. All right, that'll be good. Escape, yeah. Always a good escape. I remember reading something one time about every like something along the lines of like every good Houdini user needs to have like an object to just weight down their escape key so they can go get some coffee and just spam the escape key while they walk away. I've definitely had that. I have like a mechanical keyboard on my other computer and it's really easy to like put something on there. So like if I like something like one of these, like just stick that on the corner and go get a cup of coffee. And hopefully when you come back, everything's escaped out. Pretty silly, but all right. So it was worth a shot. I'm going to take these out of here and just keep it the way it was. And I might have to have a little think about how that would work otherwise, or ways that you could have breakable constraints based on impacts instead of based on stress, like pulling. So let's just pull this down a little bit, maybe 7. Oh, and I should just say too, the reason I'm doing this just on these two axes is because I only wanted it to scale like on this kind of ground plane and not height wise. Trying to get hit data to influence a glue constraint. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And when you're in, yeah, I mean, it might be okay, but I'm not ready to try that right now. It could technically work. And when you look at some of the solvers and things like that are out there, like using the multi-solver in some of these things and like some crazy stuff that are in them, it could technically be possible, but I really don't think it will work the way I want it to on my first go. So that one would probably require some extra work. But let's maybe play around with Well, I guess first of all, does anybody have any like thoughts or anything like that beyond, um, what we're doing right here? Any other like branches off on this, like that? Hey, what about this or anything like that? Because um, I'd rather do something that you guys are interested in. So, that's kind of why I'm here. Um, but yeah, if you guys have any questions or any thoughts or anything like that, um, I actually think that this is starting to do more or less what I was kind of hoping it would do. So, um, I was kind of thinking of going back and playing around with these a little bit more, or maybe there's something else. Point wrangle. Going back to pop swirling snow over the top of it would be cool. Yeah. So yeah, you could do it with pops. Yeah, for sure. You could also just add, um, you could just add a layer, on top of it that's getting affected just um, by the, by the wind. You could do that. Um, yeah. So yeah, there's a couple different ways you could go about doing that, right? Swirling snow over the top of it would be cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just trying to think of like the multitude of ways you could do that. You could do that. First of all, you could do swirling, like if you wanted like really swirly snow, doing some like smoke type stuff even could work depending on how you want it to look, right? If you wanted to do particles, you certainly could do that as well. You could also possibly just have more grains. Keep going back to that impact data. Um, yeah. So what I'm thinking I would maybe do with that is instead of, let's look here. Let's try something. So instead of doing the whole thing like this, what I might do is, so we have this making the chunks, right? So what I might do is make another group here and call this, let's call this loose, or we'll just call it like dust or something. I don't know. Good enough. We'll change this to points, turn this off, and we'll do keep in bounding regions. And I'm going to actually just use, because I'm basically just going to use a box anyways, so I'm just going to make this bigger. Let's see here. Yeah, there we go. To the input bounds, perfect. And I'm going to turn off these spheres. So this is kind of, no sprite. Actually, it's kind of interesting. Could sort of see it with that. So let's try it. All right. So what I would do here is I'm just going to pull this up so it's just the top kind of it. So, oh no, that looks ridiculous. Sorry. No sprite material. So there's all like kind of this top layer here, right? So we could call that dust. And I'm going to do a couple things with this. So I'm going to remove these from the chunks thing. So I'm going to do a group combine. And I'm going to just say group name chunks equals chunks subtraction with and then say dust. So that's going to remove that top layer from there. And so now we've got a top layer that aren't in the chunks here, for example. And we could then, okay, so these constraints should be made and not come up into that top level. Let's just double check, make sure it's doing what we want it to. Yep. Chunks are underneath. Cool. And the difference here is that we could now do a pop. Let's just do another pop wind here. Since we have the group with something like dust here, let's just set it to blow a little bit in the Z axis. Let's do positive Z. I don't know, 2. Hey, what are you doing there, Houdini? You didn't like that, huh? Jeez. Sorry about that, guys. Let me pull that back open. Did not like pop wind. That's lousy. All right, let's go back to that. Let's see how far we have to go. Hopefully not too far. Okay, not too bad. So we got these chunks. Yeah. Great. Okay, let's just redo that. We'll do the group. Do this real quick. Dust, not that. Bounding region, initialize it. Back there. Just hitting escape and enter to bring it into like the tool state. And I'm going to make sure that this is bounding all the way. Great. Do a group. Fine. Chunks. Fraction width. Dust. I think that's right. Seems right. Yep, top layer is good. Okay, great. Glue constraints, let's just make sure those are being made properly. Yep, great. All right, so let's do this again. Pop, wind. I hope this isn't like some sort of crazy bug. That would really stink if it does it again. I'm gonna hit save again. Group, dust. And we're going to do wind velocity. I think I had it at like 2. Let's do 1 on that. And sure, we'll just keep it like that, see how it works. So what this should do is only blow this dust around on the top. We'll see if it works or not, but that's what it should do. The other thing you could possibly do as well, let me turn the spheres back on just so we can see it a little better. The other thing you could do as well is turn down this attribute here that says attraction weight. So you could turn that down for this top so it's not sticky. Hey, Zach, how's it going, man? Welcome to the stream. So let's see here. Let's see if we can see what happens with this. Yep, doesn't seem like it's strong enough to really get anything. So let's also do that. Let's turn the attraction weight down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the attribute adjust, and it's a float. So I'm just going to use this and say the attribute name is traction weight. It's a point. We're going to not add, but we're going to multiply it and say, I don't know, we'll do a tenth of it. And the group is going to be dust. So now the dust, yep, there you go. You can see that they're getting lowered. There's, you know, those points are going to be lower attraction weight. So that's good. That should be a scale. And let's see how that works. Yeah. All right, let's try it. See if that gets us anything different. Ooh, the only, oh, that's weird. All the, yeah, I guess that makes sense. That's holding some of those things together. So now they all fell down. Hmm. Hmm. Did I do something wrong here? Let me see the groups. Let me visualize these groups real quick. Just points, dust, chunks. Turn these spheres back off. Just color these a little differently. Oh, yep, that's right. I can just take this out of here. I can say remove from the mask. There we go. Great. Yeah, that's not going to work that great, is it? Yeah, so the tricky thing with that, Lucas, that you were asking about is going to be that you need the collision from it, right? In order to have stuff like properly blowing across that surface. Probably what I would do is some sort of a, some sort of a VDB, and maybe just bring that into a particle, a little particle sim or whatever. But yeah, I think that's going to be the trickiest thing to kind of figure out with that. Put this back on, just see what this looks like. But yeah, definitely some swirling snow is cool. The other thing I was doing the last time was some some smoke stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yep. You could certainly do that. Yeah, you could do it separately. I was just thinking that maybe you could get it all in one, but yeah, a lot of times it's harder to do that. Yeah, what I would do is I would cache it all in, and then get rid of that because I don't want to do that anymore. And then I'm going to get rid of this. Yeah. So what I would do is cache this all out. In fact, we could probably do that right now. Let me just take a look at this if this is how I want it to look. Yep, there's those. Cool. Yep, let's do it. Let's cache it out. I'm going to save that to disk and background. So what I had down here in the rest of this was some pyro. So to add all of that into the rest of it. So we can take a look and see what that exactly is looking like. So what I was doing was I was sourcing the pyro based on, a speed like value threshold basically. So here I'm adjusting the speed, and we're going to get different points that are going to kind of act as our sources based on, the speeds that are, being detected and stuff like that. So as these chunks kind of come through, we're going to see that cache come up. So what I was just doing then is adding a density. I was remapping it. We were getting a density attribute. Then we were changing that into we were rasterizing that attribute, bringing that into a volume here. And yes, let's do this. Let's pull the speed here and we'll say 4 and maybe 1. So yeah, while that's caching, let's just see what this starts to do here for us. So this is the put these both up here and you can kind of see what's happening here. So yeah, this is causing obviously bringing a smoke sim in here, and we can tweak these and make it look a little bit nicer. It's maybe a little too dense for what it should be, I guess. Let me just see here if we have. Yeah, density look is probably just too high. We could bring that down a little bit. But yeah, that's obviously another way that you could, get some stuff happening in there, some interesting visuals and stuff like that. Basically all I'm doing here is calculating the speed from these points, and then putting them into this pyro solver with some collisions. We talked about that a little bit more in depth last week. I'm not going to go as far into it, but that certainly is kind of an interesting little thing to take a look at while this is caching. Oh, high particles. um, yeah, it's weird how it's spelled that way, isn't it? Yeah, it says pyro solver. Yeah, it's almost like I'm probably more contractually obliged to use the alternate spelling version. I do love Axiom, the Axiom solver though. It's really good. I have it installed on here? I don't even know if I do. No, I don't. I had it installed in 19, I think, and I just haven't installed it on here. That was another thing I was kind of thinking about, was like talking a little bit more about some third-party things like that. Rendering maybe some stuff, but I'm not that, honestly, to be completely honest, I'm not that great with shading and rendering and stuff. That's just never something I've really done that much of. So I'm always a little bit iffy on that stuff. But yeah, so that was just to kind of go back to what I had talked about a little earlier. I had a poll up and had some questions here about what kind of things are you guys interested in seeing. So I had gotten a good amount of responses for Solaris, VEX, VOPs. What's the next highest one? E, which is tops and pipeline and stuff like that. So yeah, that stuff's all things that I'm going to be kind of thinking about covering in kind of the coming year. HDA creation, that's another cool one. And then you can even kind of tie that into Unreal and things like that. So certainly have thought a little bit about doing some things about that, doing some topics using the MOPs tool set, all sorts of different things. So, there's definitely been some talk about those. There's some things I've been thinking through as far as that goes. So, so that's always something I'm interested in, is like, what are people interested in learning more about, basically. So, so there you go. We're getting a nice chunky kind of snow simulation here going on, or whatever you want to call it. But, let's see what it looks like when we play here. And if you guys are interested at all in this kind of pyro particle sim stuff, I would take a look at. I have an old video that's like one of the most popular ones that I've done, I guess. PDG, yeah. Yeah, PDG is amazing. On that note, just to give a little shout out to one of our interns that's just about done and gonna be leaving us, Daniel. He just got his whole PDG course uploaded to the interwebs on the Side Effects site. And where's my chat? Here it is. And I'm going to paste that in there. And this is a great tutorial from Daniel. He's super smart young guy, and he did a whole breakdown on kind of the tops PDG kind of workflow and stuff, talking about some overview stuff, terminology. It really gets in depth here. Really nice stuff. And it's a decent length course, but this is actually a little peek into what my work life is like, because this is the kind of stuff that I'm doing, although it kind of goes behind the scenes a little bit. We have our own kind of studio and education training site that's kind of behind the scenes a little bit, but this is one of the crossovers from that. So this is on that as well, but we also teamed up with the marketing team to put this out. So highly recommend this if you're new to Tops, or even if you've used it before. I've used it before, and I've watched through this whole thing just to help him with his course, and great stuff. Like, just, there was a few things in there that I was like, oh, how did I miss that all these years that I've been using this or doing this or whatever. So oh no, I don't know that meme. Damn, Daniel. What is that? Oh, I don't know what that is. Liam, I am maybe showing my lack of pop culture knowledge. I don't know that one. Anyways, so this is a highly recommended thing. Really, really great. Daniel did an awesome job on that. It was really fun to kind of watch him put that together. So, oh, I also think, if I'm remembering correctly, just one more thing, you should be able to get the assets from here. I'm kind of confused why the Oh, here it is. Download project files. So you can actually get the project files for this too. So they're all available to like break down and look through. So he actually made this city generator in there as well. So if you want to see how something even just like that is built, really nice too. I mean, it's very basic, but it shows you how he did that as well. So something really nice in there. So yeah, any other thoughts on this stuff that I've kind of been showing tonight, or any of these concepts or anything like that? I mean, obviously there's always stuff that I can do to keep pushing these things, but just I'm kind of thinking of wrapping everything up here. It's just about 10 o'clock my time. So getting ready to kind of wind down here for the evening. But if you guys have any other questions, I'd be happy to kind of touch on them before wrapping things up. And just as a side note too, planning to stream next week, even though it's getting a little close to Christmas, but doesn't mean I don't want to do some Houdini stuff. So planning to stream next Wednesday as well. Probably going to take the next week off just because I'm going to be off from work and giving myself a little time to kind of up some of the stuff on the stream here, add in some more, maybe some flashier graphics or something. Just kind of push myself a little bit more on that end too. So that's kind of my plans for the my Christmas break. So yeah, any other questions or thoughts or anything like that you guys are kind of that came to mind during this, or even something I could think of for next week that I could keep going with this or whatever. Obviously there was a couple of suggestions from Crossfader, but just curious if anybody else has any other thoughts or questions. So. All right, I'm going to take that as a no. So I think we're going to wrap this thing up for the evening. Thank you guys so much for joining me and chatting and hanging out. And yeah, that's kind of the whole idea here, is just giving everyone a place for some community. So yeah, hopefully, like you guys have mentioned, that there was some stuff you could pull from this. And yeah, man, Crossfader, I'll see you next time. If you guys are interested in joining the Discord server, I saw a couple people joined. Actually, somebody joined while we were streaming, so that's awesome. The invite is on the website there. You can go there and get that information. I also have a little calendar that says when my planned stream times are and everything. So that'll be on there as well. So if you're ever wondering what days I'm planning to stream on, I should have that on there. And yeah, so that is it for this evening. I'm going to be over the weekend making an actual image out of this and doing some rendering stuff for a little side effects internal competition thing. So I'll maybe show you guys what that looks like if it turns out okay over the weekend. Maybe I'll show you that next week. And yeah, we'll have something hopefully interesting next week to talk about. But for now, that's kind of where we're going to end it. And thank you guys again for joining. And it's always fun to get to talk to you all. And yeah, hopefully you can pull some good stuff out of this. And I will see you guys next week. See you, everybody.